Well, in fact, you're all either doctors or researchers, and Jean Sibilia is the one who told us in an interview in my magazine Sens and Santé, he was treating body and mind, médecin du corps et de l'esprit. This is a good formula to be a doctor to the mind and to the body. That's very important to be heard throughout your history. Very often these days there are patients that were telling me, when I go to the doctor, I come with my scanners, with my analysis, and the doctor is behind his computer screen, doesn't look at me, doesn't touch me at all, and it's through the screen that he's going to analyze me. No, the patient is first of all a history, and this is what should go into the core of this moment. So maybe we could talk with John. I'll come back to Jean-Gérard. John, I would like to ask you first of all, now, how did everything start with you to start with? I think in Massachusetts, at one time, you went to doctors because one characteristic of nowadays, which is in the core of Sens et Santé, is an increase extraordinary of chronic diseases where there's a lot of stress-related pain, sufferings. You don't die from it, but the chronic pain stops you from living fully. And those diseases that can't be explained much, they are systemic diseases and extremely complicated. And then the hospitals can't cure them anymore. And John, I think you decided to grasp these nettles and to really go into doctors to propose something to them.
True.
True. C'est vrai. That's true. Et c'est un premier point.
I want to be able to relate what I'm about to say to what Guillaume just presented us with.
Je voudrais pouvoir mettre en relation en fait ce que j'ai à dire avec ce que Guillaume.
Because one of the geniuses of this whole séance et méditation is to bring people on the stage who would ordinarily never be on the stage together in a kind of conversation that's way beyond the limits, speaking of limits, of what we usually allow ourselves to even approach.
Parce que le génie de cette plateforme, ce congrès de sciences, art et méditation, est justement d'avoir permis la rencontre entre des personnes qui jamais n'auraient l'opportunité, ou ce serait tout à fait improbable de se rencontrer dans ce type de contexte, bien au-delà de nos limites.
So this morning, Antoine talked about very, very briefly a study where they induced pain with a heat block that they put on the skin of people that are in scanners, and they're looking at the brain responding to intense aversive sensation.
Et ce matin, Antoine nous a montré cette expérience, cette recherche qui a été faite sur des personnes à qui sur lesquelles on a appuyé sur leur poignet en fait un point de chaleur intense, et pour voir les mécanismes aversifs qui peuvent s'en suivre.
And Guillaume, by sharing with us a whole bunch of different variables in your experience of what it takes to go down there in terms of the various mental factors and physical factors and breath-related factors and the mind's desires that only get in the way. This is a complete parallel to the challenges that we actually offer our patients in MBSR. It's a deep, deep, deep dive, not into water, but into themselves.
Et vraiment dans ce que Guillaume nous a montré, démontré, expliqué aussi, et toutes les différentes étapes qui se produisent donc tout au cours de sa plongée, et effectivement tous les facteurs mentaux, tous les facteurs physiques, tous les facteurs émotionnels qui sont présents, et comment les gérer. Eh bien, c'est vraiment ce que l'on propose aussi dans un programme MBSR. C'est une véritable plongée profonde.
And many of the challenges that you recounted or named but didn't have time to go into are actually experienced by every single one of our patients if they commit to that kind of invitation.
Et de même, tous les défis que tu as présentés, et peut-être encore bien d'autres, eh bien, ce sont tous les défis, effectivement, auxquels se confrontent nos patients s'ils veulent bien s'y exposer et y faire face.
So the invitation was this, and it was, I'll contextualize it a little bit. In 1979, I happened to be working for the previous 3 years at the University of Massachusetts Medical School in a laboratory in the anatomy and molecular biology department.
Et donc, pour remettre dans le contexte, voici à peu près ce qui s'est passé en 1979. Donc, j'avais travaillé pendant quelques années qui précédaient dans un laboratoire donc, de biologie moléculaire de l'Université de Massachusetts.
And I had been meditating at that point for about 13 or 14 years, and I really no longer wanted to do science the way I was doing science.
Et à ce stade, j'avais déjà 13 ou 14 ans de méditation, d'expérience de méditation, et ce que je savais, c'est que je ne voulais plus aborder la science de la façon habituelle.
So I went around and I started visiting with doctors in the hospital.
Et donc, je me suis promené dans l'hôpital et je suis allé rendre visite à différents médecins.
And I asked them questions like, what percentage of your patients do you feel you really help?
Et je leur ai posé cette question. Quel est le pourcentage de patients pour lesquels vous avez le sentiment que vous avez vraiment apporté une aide?
And they said, maybe 15%, maybe 20%.
Et ils m'ont répondu, peut-être 15%, peut-être 20%.
And I said, mon Dieu, my God.
J'ai dit, mon Dieu.
What happens to the other 80 or 85%?
Et qu'est-ce qui s'est passé pour les 85% qui restent, ou 80%?
And what they said was various ways, combinations of, well, they just stay where they are, or they're just chronic patients, and they just like subsist.
Et donc, ils ont répondu de façon variée en disant, bah oui, enfin, plus ou moins, en fait, ils en sont là où ils en sont et ils gardent leur douleur chronique et existent avec.
And I said to them, well, do you think that it might be beneficial to have a clinic program where you just refer all of the people that you don't know what to do with anymore?
Et donc je leur ai dit, est-ce que vous pensez que ce serait bénéfique, utile de créer une clinique sur laquelle vous pourriez renvoyer tous les patients avec lesquels vous ne savez plus quoi faire?
And we'll challenge them to do something for themselves that nobody else, not you or anybody else, can do for them, using these meditative practices that are thousands of years old, that include mindful hatha yoga and meditative practices coming out of the Buddhist tradition that are fundamentally non-dual, and offering them in a language, in a context that's universal.
Eh bien, et de ce fait, nous allons les mettre à défi de faire quelque chose pour eux-mêmes que personne, ni vous ni personne, ne peuvent les aider à faire, et en s'appuyant justement sur des approches traditionnelles très anciennes de yoga et de méditation dans un esprit non duel, et donc qu'ils vont pouvoir s'approprier.
And most of them said, well, I can think of about 100 people off the top of my head that I could send tomorrow.
Et la plupart de ces médecins ont répondu, oui, là, juste en y pensant comme ça, je peux penser à peu près à une centaine de personnes que je peux t'envoyer demain.
Because actually it's incredibly stressful for physicians to keep seeing people coming back that you're not in some sense able to help, because there are such very real limits in modern medicine.
Parce que c'est une véritable source de stress importante pour un médecin qui voit sans cesse revenir son patient et qui ne peut pas l'aider avec l'approche classique de médecine.
Now, it is wonderful, the miracle treatments that are available in medicine today, but actually cures in medicine are very few and far between, even today.
Et donc c'est un véritable miracle, et c'est magnifique de voir toutes les thérapies et les soins que l'on peut prodiguer dans la médecine classique, et en même temps il y a très peu de véritables cures, guérisons, même de nos jours.
And maybe with the development of personalized medicine and genomics and proteomics and just the complete genetic analysis of every patient, we can have a much more precise kind of meditation for individuals. I'm sorry, a much more precise medical treatment for individuals.
Et même avec l'approche moderne, donc au niveau génétique, qui va permettre d'avoir une possibilité de déterminer les médicaments, le traitement qui va être vraiment approprié pour chaque personne au niveau individuel.
But even after 40 years of, it's been 39 years since MBSR started, still there are very, very few cures in medicine, and many of the people that we targeted MBSR for are still falling through what we call the cracks in the healthcare system.
Et même si cela fait maintenant 39 ans, presque 40 ans que MBSR a été mis en place et expérimenté, eh bien, les patients qui viennent, qui nous arrivent dans ce contexte, eh bien, sont toujours des patients qui tombent dans cette faille en fait, médicale où il n'y a pas encore de solution à ce niveau.
And speaking of, in 1979, there were cracks in the healthcare system in the United States. Now there are Grand Canyons, chasms.
Et donc, il faut dire qu'en 1979, effectivement, il y avait ces failles dans le système de santé américain, mais maintenant, on peut parler d'un grand canyon.
So it turns out that when we invited people to participate in their own trajectory towards greater health, starting from wherever they are, wherever they found themselves, with whatever their diagnosis would be, that is a kind of become an example of what's now called participatory medicine.
Et donc c'est là où, lorsqu'on a invité les personnes à partir de là où elles en étaient, avec leur maladie, avec leur souffrance, le traitement qu'elles avaient à prendre, et de vraiment s'engager elles-mêmes à partir de leur état, eh bien ça a été le point de départ, on peut dire, de ce que l'on appelle maintenant la médecine participative.
Oui, bien sûr, the doctors do whatever it is that they can do for you.
Et bien sûr, les médecins font ce qu'ils peuvent faire pour vous.
But it works much better if you take responsibility, excuse me, for meeting your doctors by dropping in on yourself and learning how to exercise all of the different elements of the mind and body that we've been celebrating and investigating with all the panels and presentations that we've seen over the past 2.5 days.
Mais quoi qu'il fasse, cela va être encore plus efficace si effectivement vous pouvez, en tant que patient, venir à la rencontre de votre médecin et en prenant la responsabilité de ce que vous pouvez apporter et au niveau de toutes ces approches justement qui nous ont été présentées pendant ces 2 jours et demi.
And without going into the details of MBSR and the MBSR curriculum, there are parallels to everything that you presented in terms of your deep diving.
Et sans rentrer dans le détail de MBSR et du curriculum MBSR, il est intéressant de voir comme il y a des correspondances avec tout ce que tu nous as expliqué sur la plongée.
And we wind up discovering, just as with the heat block experiment or your dives, that when you learn to get out of your own way, we can actually approach things that we want to recoil from, and in the process begin to learn and integrate mind and body in ways that are actually astonishing, and only now we're beginning to have the scientific tools to really investigate at a deep level.
Et on se rend compte que ce soit avec la recherche donc au niveau de la chaleur intense ou que ce soit au niveau de ta plongée, que si l'on accepte, il y a ce même mécanisme, que si l'on accepte de mettre de côté nos vieux schémas habituels, eh bien là il va y avoir la possibilité effectivement de découvrir une approche corps-esprit et que la science maintenant nous donne la possibilité de mettre à jour.
And this will be the last thing I'll say because now I don't want to sort of hold the microphone any longer. But what Antoine and what Perla and other people said about the science this morning is very, very important to keep in the forefront of our minds.
Et vraiment, la dernière chose que je vais dire maintenant, parce que je ne veux pas m'approprier le micro, mais c'est que ce que Antoine et Perla et d'autres nous ont dit ce matin sont vraiment des choses qu'il nous faut garder au premier plan de notre esprit.
Looked at one way, from a very naive perspective, we seem to know a lot in science, and the scientific studies can seem very impressive.
Et d'un point de vue assez naïf, on peut se rendre compte qu'il y a beaucoup de choses qui sont connues en matière scientifique et que c'est très impressionnant.
But compared to what we don't know about the brain, about the body, about other dimensions of the body, including the gut being a kind of brain, that the lungs are a kind of brain, that it's not like we're a bunch of different parts. We're integrated in ways that Francisco Varela was absolutely clear about from the very beginning, that everything is interconnected with everything else and touches everything else, not just in our bodies, but also in globally, in the world, in society. And he used the example of French culture as an example of how everything is interconnected with everything else.
Mais comparé en fait à tout ce que nous ne savons pas encore, le fait que effectivement toute la région intestinale est comme un deuxième cerveau, que les poumons sont aussi un deuxième cerveau et qu'en fait tout cela s'est connecté, qu'il y a vraiment une interconnexion, que nous ne sommes pas faits de systèmes séparés. Et c'est vraiment ce que depuis le début Francisco Varela a mis en évidence, qu'il a véritablement compris toute cette interconnexion non seulement de nos systèmes internes mais aussi de tout notre système, de tout notre être avec l'environnement, avec les systèmes extérieurs. Il a montré aussi par rapport à la civilisation française.
The only other thing I'll say is that your presentation reminded me that for many years we were invited to train people with chronic obstructive lung disease in the pulmonology clinic. The pulmonary clinic.
Et ton intervention me rappelle en fait que pendant de nombreuses années, on nous demandait d'intervenir au niveau de problèmes pulmonaires dans la section donc pulmonaire de l'hôpital.
And when you lose elasticity in the lungs, you can't actually take a full breath of air, and you can't exchange this kind of pulmonary volume that you did before.
Parce que lorsque vous perdez l'élasticité de vos poumons, alors vous ne pouvez plus prendre l'air qui est nécessaire, tout le volume d'air qui est nécessaire.
And you go through tremendous shortness of breath, sometimes on exertion or sometimes just with anxiety.
Et donc vous êtes soudain à court de respiration, vous ne pouvez plus prendre d'air et parfois avec beaucoup d'anxiété.
And as soon as you can't breathe in, the more you want to breathe in, the more you try to breathe in, and the more you can't breathe in.
Et donc le moins vous pouvez inspirer, le plus vous voulez inspirer, et vous êtes vraiment anxieux de pouvoir inspirer, et le moins vous allez pouvoir inspirer.
And when you were demonstrating Uddiyana Bandha, you know, where you actually bring the belly in with and empty the lungs completely, we taught people at that moment when you are about to panic, because you don't have to be like, you know, 100, 200 meters under or whatever it is in order to panic. You can panic as soon as you can't take this breath.
Et tu as fait la démonstration de cette posture de yoga où tu arrives à vider complètement tes poumons. Et c'est vraiment là aussi un moment crucial de panique. Il n'y a pas besoin de descendre à 100 mètres sous l'eau, car dès que l'on est à court de souffle et que l'on ne peut pas inspirer l'air qui est nécessaire, il y a immédiatement cette panique qui se met en place.
And the instinct is to breathe in. We train people to breathe out.
Et donc l'instinct est d'inspirer et nous apprenons aux personnes d'expirer.
As soon as you breathe out, paradoxically, physics becomes your friend.
Mais dès que l'on peut expirer de la sorte, eh bien de façon paradoxale,
Physics, la physique.
La physique devient votre ami.
Because now the pressure in the lungs is reduced, and it's lower than the pressure outside, so the air will come in by itself.
Parce que la pression au niveau pulmonaire est réduite par rapport à la pression extérieure et donc l'air va pénétrer de lui-même.
So that's one way in which people with chronic obstructive lung disease can actually self-regulate their panic and their dyspnea, and at the same time, because the elasticity of the lungs is no longer what it was, use secondary muscles of breathing that you can cultivate and practice with and work with down here to actually live a high quality life, even with those kinds of physiological and, so far as we know, irreversible damage to the lungs.
C'est ainsi qu'avec cette pathologie, eh bien, ces patients donc, peuvent auto-réguler leur fonctionnement. Donc, même si ils ont perdu l'élasticité de leurs poumons, ils peuvent s'appuyer sur un autre système musculaire et justement apprendre par ces exercices à réguler déjà leur anxiété par rapport à cela.
Merci.
Merci John. On va continuer.
Thank you, John. We'll continue with our tour. Later on, you can go deeper into these issues. But you've just mentioned the idea of participatory medicine. And I believe that we are very much at the heart of what people expect from medicine today when they're patients. I mean, who knows patients best, if not patients themselves? The patient is the first one to know what happens to him or her, what he goes through, and he has to find some meaning, particularly when he is ill. I would like to focus on the issue of anxiety. It's a word that was used on many an occasion, and I believe that today we know that depression is one of the growing scourges of our society. In 2025, according to the WHO, it will be one of the first chronic diseases in the world. That is quite representative of this anxiety we are all familiar with. I'd like to turn to Guido Bondolfi, a medical professor. I didn't introduce him earlier on. He is a professor at the medical faculty in Geneva. He works for the University Hospitals of Geneva. He is a head physician of the psychiatric unit. His research focuses on how to integrate mindfulness and meditation in the treatment of psychiatric disorders, particularly in emotional regulation, which plays a major role in people's anxiety and mood. Would meditation and mindfulness not be the cure-all in this century, given our fragile psyche and minds? With a microphone, please. It may be a little pretentious to say that this can be a panacea, but what interested me, I wasn't destined to go into this world, but it was thanks to John, amongst others, that I got interested in this topic. I was interested in psychiatry and depression. We organized the retreat in Ontario in 2000 with people who'd developed a program on the prevention of psychiatric relapses. And during that retreat, I got to talk to John, and I better understood how meditation practice could be a tool to avoid relapse. To say things simply, we know today that depression is not a one-off type of disease. It may repeat itself. You suffer from strong stress. Sometimes you've lost somebody, somebody's died, you've lost your job or your spouse, etc. So there is a lot of stress. Now, when there is relapse, all it takes is for the mood to decline, and you slip like on a banana, you slip into a new depression or depressive state. When you're a little sad and there's no reasons justifying this sadness, one should wonder why one is sad. Everything goes well in your life, but why are you sad? Now, this may facilitate relapse into depression. Now, the people who developed this program I mentioned earlier on, counterintuitively, in the same way as participatory medicine, tend to offer to patients the opposite of what they would tend to do when there's a stressful moment. And this is what Guillaume said too. You have to accept these transitional, painful moments rather than go against them, rather than trying to hide from them or get rid of them. This is profoundly counterintuitive. When you have a negative thought, you just want to get rid of that thought. So the programs that were developed are very pragmatic and teach patients or former patients who suffered from depression to go through difficult experiences. For instance, remain seated during 45 minutes. After a while, your body aches, your legs ache. Now, what would push you to change your attitude? What would push you to get up? And when these bad thoughts and emotions are back, you will have enough training not to lapse back onto that slippery slope that would take you down into depression again. This is what fascinated me then. And over the years, it has enabled us to show in a similar program to the one developed by John on stress reduction, is just as efficient to treat depression and relapse into depression. A lot of patients who suffered from depression have had antidepressant depression treatment, but there are secondary or side effects, and therefore people are sometimes a bit reluctant to go that way. Now, this requires participation and commitment. Which patients do you offer that program to? Well, patients who suffered from depression, who are no longer in an acute depressive state. We offer that program so that they don't relapse into depression, but usually these are patients that suffered from 2 depressions in the past. How does that happen? Can you offer this program to everyone during the year? Yes, we organize them all over the year for about a dozen people, very similar to John's MBSR program. It's a program that stretches over 8 weeks. It all depends on whether people continue with that program after 8 weeks. And in terms of prevention, is it efficient? Yes, it is, to prevent relapse into depression. We know that mindfulness practice reduces anxiety, improves the life quality. It doesn't cure depression in an acute state, but it is a very efficient way to prevent a new onset of depression, which is a very painful experience. Now, do you also have programs meant for caregivers, carers? Well, over the years, this is something that has evolved in my mind. Now I work in a general care hospital. I came back to hospital and found out that carers suffer from stress, from burnout. A lot of people are away from work because they have undergone burnout or are depressed. And our plan is to offer this kind of program to future medical students, nurses, healthcare professionals altogether, physicians, doctors, nurses, any kind of caregiver, to enable them to manage their stress and be more present, more involved in their relationship with the patients. Because what do patients often complain of? I think you talked about that. They want to have quality care, but they also insist on the human contact, the individual contact. This is not necessarily what these big programs take on board, but patients want to be taken into account as human beings. They want to be listened to, sometimes no more than that. Is that complicated for carers or caregivers? Well, we're physicians, we're caregivers. We know that when we listen to a patient, we know that in our medical studies, we were told how to recognize signs and symptoms. And that means that you put patients in categories according to their syndromes and symptoms. Now, that is necessary. It's the kind of knowledge we need. But what is dramatic here is that we seem to have lost the human aspect. We offer all kinds of diagnoses and therapies, but we tend to sometimes lose our identity, i.e. this unique contact with one individual who suffers from one problem. That person is not just interested in the diagnosis. Let's continue in that wake, the relationship between a physician, a doctor, and his patients. Jean-Gérard has been very present so far in this conference. He hasn't yet been able to talk about his specialty. He's a specialist in rheumatology. Some years ago, he introduced John's program. 8 years ago, he says. 8 years ago, he introduced John's program in his own medical practice. In 2010, he developed this university diploma, meditation, medicine, and neurosciences, to train doctors, researchers. They go on a retreat. They're invited to practice and share their teaching and thoughts. Now, there's a detail one has to insist on. It's not meditation, medicine, and neuroscience program. It's a program where meditation is included between two very serious subject matters. Now, you have an existing structure, but it is not obvious to integrate meditation in that structure. Now, the first time I interviewed you, You told me that meditation changed you completely, but also changed your relationship to your patients. And you don't deal with your patients in the same way as you used to do. So can you tell us what has changed there? Well, it changed a lot of things. I didn't tell you everything when you interviewed me. Well, I hope not. First, I have to tell you that I don't think that meditation is the only way to accede to this connection to the other, the patient or oneself. I hope that these 2.5 days we've spent together with these very varied presentations, covering different areas but talking about the same subject matter at the end of the day, that they're beneficial to you. What Guillaume showed us is highly interesting. Now, for your own reasons, you explored your own experience, you explained how you live things in situations that you've chosen, very difficult situations. Sometimes life puts us in difficult situations, under pressure, under constraints, physical and mental constraints at the same time sometimes. And you gave us evidence of what that brought to you. When people are ill, when patients are ill, what you feel is this: how can one face that? You can be very passive and say, well, medical doctors will deal with that. And then there are other offers. Meditation, the MBSR program is an extraordinary alternative whereby you can offer patients to partake in what happens to them. They're almost guided. They're offered possibilities to explore their experience through disease and pain, etc. You explained your approach. It's the same kind of approach we're offering through the MBSR meditation program in the face of pain. Now, personally, what did this bring to me? Well, it brought me that benevolence we're trying to develop and share with others. It's not obvious to impose that. We always have objectives and aims to reach. I have become more kind and benevolent vis-à-vis myself, my defects. Now, it doesn't mean complacency, but we all have our little secrets and problems, but at least I could face them in all humility. Thanks to this practice, thanks to benevolence that I try and apply to myself, I have also become kinder vis-à-vis others. It has also taught me to abandon the posture of the expert. Guido was saying that you acquire a certain expertise in the medical sphere, but there's the expertise you use at the service of a patient and the posture as an expert. And that posture vis-à-vis a patient is something we adopt very naturally. Sometimes they put us on a pedestal, and we do have to work our way down from that pedestal. We don't want to use and abuse the power given to us. In a genuine relationship that may develop thanks to such a presence, this is where meditation has an essential role to play. You can solicit this expertise. It will be there in the background, and you can establish a connection with the person standing in front of you. You can share ideas, and the only real expert who knows about his own experience is the patient himself. We
We'll check whether this is true. Beatrice Pirou is your patient. She was brave enough to join us. Give her a round of applause, please.
Voilà. Tu veux la présenter, madame?
Would you like to introduce her, Jean-Gérard? Beatrice is a friend, a patient who consulted me for rheumatology problems. She can talk about them if she wishes. And she was received treatment, classical in rheumatology, and she felt that she was ready to follow an MBSR program, which I don't impose during my consultation, but I can suggest it sometime. Not all patients go along with that because it's not something that necessarily attracts everybody. But it was quite a while ago, wasn't it, Beatrice? The MBSR program, I started it 8 years ago. Slightly after it's rheumatoid polyarthritis. But once you get the diagnosis, you are shaken. I was a little older than 50, and you don't think that you're going to have a future since you're suffering from an autoimmune disease. And Jean-Gérard told me, well, treatment is just for a short period of time, but these are lifelong treatments. The acute phase can come often. And since I like to do a lot of things and move, it was very difficult to accept it at the beginning. And then Jean-Gérard suggested to me to follow the MBSR course. And I hadn't really understood that it was about meditation at the beginning. And you gave me some documents to read so I could become familiar with it. And I started that to obtain something, i.e. improvement of my health, no more pain, and to recover some mobility. So I needed to recover my mobility, even if I suffered from lumbago or I sprained my ankle. So everything was difficult during meditation at the outset because there is silence and I like to talk, and we took meals in silence and it was very difficult for me. And I followed the 8-week program. I was very assiduous, but to stay in formal meditation is something that I don't even do to this day, or very little. But what happened quite quickly, I felt that I wasn't going to meditate to obtain something. That wasn't the idea. And slowly things happened. Now, I really liked what people spoke about limits, everything that was Senses Friday, and particularly what Guillaume said. You said, whatever you said, I thought that I had experienced the same thing about limits, the different phases of limits. I always wanted to go beyond my limits, and there was always injury after that. And I remember a group session we had, and what suddenly was revealed to me was that the limits were exceeded by others vis-à-vis myself, and I don't like conflicts. And I understood that I needed to set myself some limits inside and find some freedom inside me. I don't know whether my words really express things properly, but slowly I understood that there was no longer an obligation there was no longer any obligation to respect a discipline and to have a reward at the end. For me, meditation means freedom now. And in this way, you can reach another phase of the process, because I started 8 years ago. And sometimes you come to a crossroad. Before, I had the impression that when you had an activity to accomplish, then I had damages at the end, but I had no choice. But now I have greater choice. And when something adverse happens, or there is pain, I now, not always, of course, it's not a magic solution. Things don't become easy immediately, but I can stop and say, I have a choice. The choice of what? For example, when I have pain, since we're in the health area, when I had pain, I did exactly what Guillaume described. If you breathe and if you are in the water, it becomes a glass bottle and it breaks. So resisting pain, I've been told, grit your teeth and just carry on. But it's quite the reverse that you have to do. And this is what I learned. So when pain comes, the first reflex is, I wanted to stop, I wanted to stop, I want to fight it. But then, thanks to the meditation that we've done, I stop and I say to myself, let's stop. And then I take time, I take a few breaths, I become aware of where the pain is, and I question my body. What is my body telling me? And I don't try to find an analysis or make an analysis, but I just listen to myself. And curiously, there is a relaxation, physical relaxation, which I can feel. And this is what regularly happens. So you have the pain, but you don't experience it in the same way. Yes, I would describe it that way. It is there. It's there. We have scientists here, and perhaps there are little symbols that come up and say, right, I have a pain. But in my brain, I'm not prisoner of my pain any longer. And that is what is so important for me. Okay, maybe there will be people in the room who will echo what you have said about pain.
Merci, mais je voudrais continuer le tour et me tourner enfin.
And now I would like to turn towards Jean Sibilia. I didn't quite fully introduce you. I said that you were the dean of the Faculty of Medicine in the University of Strasbourg. You're a practitioner and in rheumatology, and you president of the National Coordination Committee of Research devoted to public hospital research, and you have established recently an observatory of complementary and integrative medicines in the Conference of French Deans. And this is very recent, and that may have consequences, positive ones. So, about pain and the link between the body and mind. You have become a doctor of the body and mind, but that wasn't the case at the outset. You were a scientist, a researcher, and you had doubts about different approaches to medicine. Well, I'm the only one you say vous to in French. Well, it doesn't really matter. But what is important here, really, is to raise the right questions and to make things move forward. And the purpose of these meetings is that we can move forward. I simply wanted to respond to your question about the medicine of the body and the mind. Let's put things into context, as Guillaume said. We have sometimes revelations that we cannot analyze. And we discussed this with Jean-Gérard when we prepared these meetings, because nothing happens by coincidence. Everything that happens in life takes place for good reasons. Sometimes we don't know it, but it's so. So we must be aware of the fact that everything is in everything. And this really shocked me, because I had come to a certain conclusion, but one can come to it through spirituality. And when we discussed Buddhism meditation with Jean-Gérard, some people come to it through Oriental approach, but others have reached this through experience. And this is why I was so mesmerized by what Guillaume said. I learned to do apnea with my father, and I was 6 years old, and I did that with my father, and I still remember this experience of going down in the water 3-4 meters, and this feeling of the water that you have on your body, and to be in an element you didn't quite understand. And when you say we're small dolphin or a sperm whale, when you're in the water, this comes back to you somehow. You still have parts of your brain which has been here since the living world has come into being. And I completely understand what he spoke about. And then this resonates, this question of deprivation. Once I was lost in the mountains. I never had gone trekking, and I was 22 years old, and I went off with a friend, and we said, well, yes, we're sports people, we can do it. We're going to do the 5-hour trek in 3 years, so no humility whatsoever. And then we got lost, and then there were clouds all over the mountain, and we slept there, and it was a very strange night. There were falling stars. I hadn't eaten, drunk, because we hadn't taken any victuals with us. I was very thirsty, and suddenly I had a revelation, because I realized that everything is in everything. You know, the concept that we're stardust. He said that he was a water molecule, and our molecules, they do not disappear. Our atoms never disappear. One day you're going to die. We're all going to die. But its atoms will be infinitely recycled in the universe. And that day, I felt extremely optimistic. I mean, dying is no big deal. You're not going to disappear. I'm telling you something very personal. But that feeling that everything is everything, this experience that I had forgotten about, this trekking expedition. Another experience, which is a scientific one, everything is symbiotic. We have the impression of living in a society where everything goes very fast. There's no great mindfulness or benevolence. But all those who are here are convinced people, and at the moment society is divided. It's an aggressive society, but nature has created something different. Everything is in symbiosis. Corals would not exist if there wasn't a symbiosis between these different beings that live together. What I like, telling a story. You know, your butterflies, ants, and rabbits. There's no link between the three, but the three cannot live one without the other. There was an experiment in Britain where there was a myxomatosis epidemic in rabbits. The butterflies disappeared. And since the butterfly use the anthill, and if there is no longer grass, ants disappear. So everything is linked in ecosystems. It's very important to understand that. And I will finish with one last symbiosis. Our own cells breathe because they have incorporated a bacterium, prokaryotes apparently, and our cells incorporated in symbiosis a prokaryote in the karyote, and mitochondria is what allows our cells to breathe. So you can. This really shows that everything is in everything. And that particular experience, because you only speak well of things when you have experienced something, the experience through apnea, the experience of science that John spoke about, all these are human experiences, and we all share them. So we all live in this world. Now, Guillaume is a superman. He has understood everything, but if only we could all transmit this, that it's enough to be humble, and that everything is in everything, that everything is in symbiosis, and give up aggressiveness. Why do we have a medicine that englobes the mind and the body? Well, it's very simple. That's the solution.
Et comment on réalise cette symbiose?
So how do you achieve this symbiosis in today's medicine? How can we do that? Well, no dogmatism. That's what I was trying to say at the beginning. Chemotherapies are no doubt useful, antibiotics too. Even we do like bacteria, but you have to do away with aggressive bacteria. But nothing should be dogmatic. You have to use the right tools at the right time. And it's that type of medicine mentioned by John, predictive, personalized, participative, but relevant as well. And that medicine has to be implemented with all the tools we have at hand. I'm surprised by some of my colleagues who are academics and say, this is fake news, it doesn't exist. And we see such strange reactions to meditation, for example, or to other medicines, integrative medicine. This integrative medicine may not have the same level of validation. But we have to ask ourselves whether we have the right tools. So let's be humble. We should have an open mind, body, medicine that uses all these tools. And rather than say it's not been validated, let's try. And Guillaume said we have to be creative. We have to explore. This is what John said, because I'm sure that 40 years ago, when he said to doctors that maybe we should do this or that, I mean, somebody must have thought that he was a bit odd. But we need to be humble, okay? But we are a body and a mind. You just have to listen to a patient or to Guillaume. You don't even need to make long speeches about that. So we have set ourselves an objective to transmit this in our training. We're not going to change the world overnight, but through training, we are convinced, and information, we have to convince others, convince children that we are part of nature, that it needs to be respected, that it's very fragile. Corals, you change 1 or 2 degrees, it just dies. And mankind is the same thing. We're here on this planet, but if the temperature increases, God knows what happens. We have to live together. We have to be united. And the medicine, body-mind medicine, is just an extrapolation.
comment vous envisagez...
Exactly. How do you think that you're going to train the doctors of tomorrow? In the university training of doctors nowadays, they call upon scientific brains, first of all. That's how the training is organized. You've lost in sight the humanistic side. And for some people, they even discover in hospital that they find themselves in front of a human being, the patient that makes our humanity. And then what can we consider nowadays in this training of doctors to have doctors that are going to be having a mind for tomorrow? I think that we're not going to change the world in 7 days. It's going to take time. The doctor is only an adult who is going through a professional objective because he wants to commit himself to help the other. We are all doctors because we want to exchange, we want to take care, a kind of generosity, humbly generosity. And it's only due to an educational vision of our society which is different. We think that we are going to get everything done in university when you get to it and when you are 18. It's too late when you're 18. Really, you have to start at the very, very bottom. The President of the Republic has a very good initiative. I don't know who gave him the idea. The health care service, all the healthcare workers are going to be trained to society, but they're going to be sent out to schools and explain to the children in schools that they have to view the world differently. You're not going to change it from university. It's too late. You've got to change it from the schools, from the families, from the parents. That's how you're going to get things changed. That's how you're going to get things to really change. So this is going to be set up, this experience next September, future pharmacists, future physiotherapists, nurses, carers, doctors who are going to be called upon to go to the colleges and the schools everywhere, even in the unfavored districts. I don't want people to the highest universities of Paris to go to the 16th arrondissement in Paris, the most rich one. You've got to go to the much poorer districts everywhere. It's very important in the education. Of course, my job, I'm not going to do it all the time. I'm dean right now. I like to do it because it enables me to transmit all my values. I don't think I'm going to do everything, but at least I'll try the most. I want to transform this second cycle of training to change things. Of course, in university, the doctors that we're going to train and select, we're going to train them more to be competent, relevant, rather than to have knowledge. Of course, you need to have your knowledge, but tomorrow's medicine is going to be accompanied by intelligent, artificial intelligence. It's going to be concrete reform. It's on the minister's desk on the 25th of July. I'm going to see the minister with a presentation on the reform of the second cycle of training, and I do hope that we are reaching the end of this approach and will have a vision that is totally different of doctors' training, more humanistic, more societal, more linked up with NGOs, etc., etc. It's not that easy. Changing the world, lots of people tried it, not many people succeeded. And this is what we said, if we don't try, who's going to try? So maybe we won't be successful, but there's not much point. Let's try it. There's no harm in trying and not succeeding. When you advance in age anyway in life, you realize that you're not going to be successful in everything, but I think you've got to try. You were not there, but the 3 words I said on Friday evening, I did say wonderment, mindfulness, benevolence, and creativity. Jean-Gérard wasn't there. Well, I don't know. That's exactly what you were saying as well. If we put in our energy, each one of us, well, keep optimistic. Maybe we will be successful. I am extremely optimistic. Thank you.
Est-ce que Jean-Gérard ou Guido...
Jean-Gérard or Guido on this question of tomorrow's medicine, the doctor tomorrow, how they're going to take care of the patients. Do you want to react, to tell us your hopes, your experience? I think you've introduced in Strasbourg, I think, on mindfulness for the students training in the third cycle. Yes, that's what you've done. Yes, it's always the same thing. We're trying to fine-tune a little bit the training to try and change things piecemeal. But the students in medicines, as they come, they have a certain education, of course, certain knowledge, and they're still at some point open, and it's a crucial moment because they have so much information, technical information that they have to digest, statistical, medical information. To put a human level on top of that is essential. What is very important in this meditation study is we've created in the university with Jean a course of meditation in the third cycle of medicine. It's a pioneer course here in France, and it's interesting to see that those students are extremely interested in what we're doing, and thanks to that they are interested not only in practicing to be less stressed out or have a vision that is more wide-ranging of meditation, but more wide-ranging also they are interested in how they can have a good relationship with their own selves in their different situations, because it has an immense impact on your relationship with the other people, with the patients, and when you practice it, they see how they can get into a relationship which is deeper with the patients. It's all around the art of relationships with the other. And in tomorrow's medicine, that's going to be the only thing that is left over with artificial intelligence. All the computers are going to be doing all the technical work more efficiently than us, the human beings, but there'll still be this core human dimension that we will need. We will always need to be seen, consulted, to be recognized, acknowledged, to be trusting, and to be taken as a whole. So if the students can learn to do that very early on, it's a good thing. Guido, on this point. Well, I think there are doctors, but as you said yourself, there are other professionals in the healthcare like yourself. I'm aware of the fact that it can bring the practice of mindfulness, a new approach to help those people. First, look after yourself, because the hope of any carer, doctor, is to take care of the others. But we haven't got the good tools to look after ourselves to start with, so that we can look after the others. And this is at the core of this approach. We might be a little bit late. Maybe we should have been doing it at the very beginning of education of children. But this is one way that we can do with this type of program. It's the same thing in Strasbourg. It's not compulsory. It's an invitation of the students to come in, as mindfulness is, and it's quite interesting to see how much this type of offer hits on with a lot of interest from people who in fact want to see something that really speaks to them and fulfills some of their expectations. So there's a lot of margin of maneuver that we can have here. It's high time to start it, but as an information I can tell you, as far as I know, 80% of all universities in the US, I think it's a recent data, have mindfulness programs either centered on research or training or education. So really, it is a phenomenon which is going really, really deeply, not just at the surface, but with a lot of interest, with a lot of expectations from those people who are asking, are in demand of this caring for yourself. And this comes from the patients as well, doesn't it? They do demand, they do expect this. For the moment, the patients are complaining more. They say that they haven't been taken into account. Their subjective self is not taken into account. It depends on the individual sensitivity. What is missing now is that in a training, professional healthcare training, you don't take into account the meeting of the subjective self. And as I said, there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a possibility of doing a lot more. Something that is, well, again, I'm not going to say it's antithesis. It is not in conflict with the development of the knowledge of the carers. We're not going to reject all the technological progresses that improved medicine nowadays. It's an and, not an or. It's something that should be added to, complementary. Right, would you like to share an experience, or would you like to put a question? It's still possible to the same microphones which are on either side of the room. Do some of you want to share with us? I can see somebody coming to the microphone. This is not a share, but rather a question. For 2.5 days now, what we're living through is just so enriching. Thank you so much, because this is a huge life period that we can add. I have 2 teenagers back home, and I'd like to share with them those 2.5 days that I've lived through with you to make them more durable. Is everything you've just said, is it going to be accessible later on so that it can be propagated, it can be disseminated, distributed as widely as possible so that we can continue on the path? Thank you very much to tell me that. It's really nurturing our intention to create this event. Thanks to you. You are here and you enable us to be. Yes, it's going to be accessible in a format we don't know exactly how, but practically everything has been recorded, some of the artistic performances for evident reasons, but yes, it is going to be accessible and shared out. Accessible to teenagers, your children.
Oh, that's a good question. Hopefully it could be in English too.
It should be in English and French. So why body, mind? John comes from the Buddhist tradition, says body, spirit and mind. When you talk about medicine, the speech is essential, the word is essential. You have the dialogue being set up between 2 people to start with. Now, from my point of view, you really have to talk about the 3, body, mind, and spirit. And I see that in medicine, you shouldn't talk about medicine, but you should talk about taking care of people and curing them. Every time you say medicine, you see a doctor, a médecin. And for me, it's linked up to what I learned from Francisco Varela, is that, in fact, it's the speech, the word, that enables individual universes, individual experiences, which are impossible to communicate, to connect up. Experiences of colors. We learned what is red, the color red. We can put that idea in common. There are cultures where green doesn't exist, for example. So there's the communication of those experiences which go through the word, the spoken word. Not only there are resonances that exist as well, but really let us not forget the word, the spoken word. The spoken word. Well, we talked about psychoanalysis. We didn't talk about it a lot. Who would like to talk about the spoken word, to say the link that there is when we talk about body and spirit and mind? Maybe John?
Language is incredibly important.
Le langage est extrêmement important.
It's also one of the greatest mysteries of our humanity.
Et c'est aussi un des plus grands mystères de notre humanité.
Noam Chomsky, the greatest linguist probably who ever lived, recently came out with a book called What Kind of Creatures Are We?, in which he talks about the profound mystery of the connection between language and thinking.
Et Noam Chomsky, qui est un des plus grands linguistes qui existe, vient de publier un livre dont le titre est Quel type de créature sommes-nous, et où il établit justement le lien, l'évaluation entre le langage et la parole.
And it's been a theme here throughout, that the interconnectedness, the tout et tout that you're talking about, this profound interconnectedness of the entire universe, there's an element of mystery to it.
Et de même que tout ce qui a été abordé ici, cette notion d'interconnexion, d'interrelation, comme tu en as parlé, Guillaume, de tout ce qui existe dans l'univers, eh bien, détient un profond mystère en soi.
In fact, profound mystery, as Michel Pibol is an extraordinary voice for pointing out that quantum mechanics itself, which is kind of foundational in physics, no one actually has the slightest idea about the nature of the reality of the quantum world.
Et un mystère si profond que justement Michel Pibol ici est celui qui peut le pointer le plus précisément, et où il dit bien qu'au niveau de la physique quantique, eh bien, ce monde quantique en fait ne peut pas être pénétré véritablement, qu'il reste là un mystère extrêmement profond.
Now, when you use the word spirit, I stay as far away from the word spirit as possible, to tell you the truth.
Alors, spirit in French, ça va...
Well, she used it in English, so I'm going back to her.
Donc ce mot...
I know, c'est problématique.
En français.
C'est même la guérison is not healing, is a curing. So, but let me just say in English, don't translate this part, that when you use spirit, you're making things complicated. That's why people use mind-body medicine. Leave it at that. For complex reasons we won't go into, why don't you just say that?
Et donc peut-être de rester au niveau de ce qui est des termes qui sont utilisés de médecine corps-esprit, et de ne pas aller au-delà de cela, parce que ce terme de spirit, ou je ne sais pas comment dire en français en fait, qui est plus à un niveau spirituel, je dirais, complique les choses.
The last thing I want to say is, let's listen very carefully, whether it's French or whether it's English. Medicine, meditation.
Et maintenant, que ce soit en français ou en anglais, sonnez vraiment soigneusement, écoutez soigneusement à ces deux termes, médecine et méditation.
They are linked at the etymological hip.
Et donc, ils sont connectés au niveau étymologique.
So it's very valuable to ask first-year medical students in the first semester, when they just come into medical school, okay, what does the word medicine mean?
Et c'est pourquoi il est intéressant de demander à vos étudiants en médecine, dès qu'ils arrivent pour commencer leurs études, mais que signifie ce terme de médecine?
They will tell you all sorts of interesting things.
Et ils vont vous dire toutes sortes de choses intéressantes.
The word medicine, its root in the Latin is to cure.
Mais le terme, la racine du terme médecine, donc en latin, signifie donc de guérir.
But its deep Indo-European root is to measure.
Mais en fait, sa profonde racine indo-européenne signifie de mesurer.
And it's not the bars in the Paris Bureau of Standards that you externally measure something with an external ruler or weight or anything like that. It's the more Platonic notion that everything has its own right inward measure, or homeostasis or allostasis.
Et donc, ça n'est pas une barre de mesure matérielle comme pour mesurer le poids ou une longueur ou autre, mais plutôt l'aspect platonique, qui vient de Platon, et qui donc se réfère à une dimension d'homéostasie, d'équilibre interne.
And that includes tout, you know, et tout. That includes everything is interconnected.
Et ça inclut donc toute chose dans cette dimension d'interconnexion.
So, from that perspective, well, what is meditation?
Et donc, dans cette perspective, de quoi parle-t-on lorsqu'on parle de méditation?
Meditation is the direct perception of right inward measure.
Car la méditation, eh bien, c'est la perception directe de cette mesure interne juste.
Or complete interconnectedness of everything with everything else.
Ou de la nature d'interconnexion totale de toute chose avec toute chose.
So in the US, medicine is in the process of transforming itself, and it really needs it enormously.
Et donc aux États-Unis, donc la médecine est en train d'entrer dans un processus de transformation d'elle-même, et c'est quelque chose dont elle a énormément besoin.
And I'll just say that in 1998, I was instrumental in helping to form a consortium of academic medical centers for integrative medicine in North America.
Et donc, je voudrais juste dire qu'en 1998, j'ai été appelée pour collaborer à mettre en place une sorte de consortium d'établissements de médecine intégrative un peu partout aux États-Unis.
Almost every medical school in North America, including Canada and Mexico, as well as the United States, is a member of that consortium.
Et donc, toutes les facultés de médecine des États-Unis, du Canada et aussi du Mexique sont membres de ce consortium.
But in terms of language, even the word integrative medicine is problematic.
Mais en termes de langage, même ce terme de médecine intégrative est problématique.
We've gone from alternative medicine, complementary medicine, to integrative medicine, and now what is really called for is good medicine.
On est parti de la médecine alternative pour arriver à la médecine complémentaire, puis la médecine intégrative, mais maintenant ce dont nous avons vraiment besoin, c'est de bonne médecine.
So how you do this in your country, of course, medicine in every country is practiced differently, it has a different culture. So we're at the point where we're basically trying to transform medicine to recognize that it includes the mind, the body, spirit, every aspect of what it means to truly be human, and that there is that Chomskyan mystery to all of it. That's not a problem, it's actually beauty, and that our patients, when they come to us, no matter what the problem is, that our patients are what you might call miraculous beings. They're completely whole, and that there's much, much more right with them than wrong with them, even if they're one day away from dying.
Et quelle que soit la culture du pays dans lequel la médecine est établie, avec ses propres codes, eh bien, on en arrive tout de même là à une vision globale justement de cette dimension corps-esprit de la médecine, et en même temps avec ce profond mystère qui demeure et qui nous fait dire que les patients sont des êtres miraculeux, même s'ils sont au stade d'1 heure avant leur décès.
Alors on va peut-être continuer.
Let's continue a little while.
If you have fit translating for me.
Et on va revenir en...
We'll come back to the issue of body and mind with John later on. Jean Sibilia, you wanted to react to this issue very succinctly, yes, to contribute to the common reflection here. Whales communicate with each other via singing. They don't talk to each other, they sing. So there are other modes of communication we tend to forget. Atoms communicate with each other. So when it comes to elementary matter, there's other ways of communicating. It goes beyond the spoken word. Now, if we may dream, one would probably hope that a complete integration would mean this. Now, the word medicine is almost pejorative. It's almost looked down upon. Well, like your doctors, like your physicians, that's important. You have to start that way. One has to love each other. You have to love each other in the noblest sense of the word. But what I would like to see is this integration of medicine, philosophy, and spirituality. That's genuine integration. If we manage to integrate these three concepts, it would be wonderful. Now, Socrates used to say that he gave birth to people's soul. He was a philosopher. Philosophers are sometimes just as wrong as doctors are. In our Western societies, this discrepancy is a worm in the apple. So spirituality, philosophy, medicine, if we manage to reconcile these three elements, that would be wonderful. That would be considerable progress in my mind.
Vous avez la parole.
You have the floor. Hello, thank you very much for all your interventions. I have a question about schizophrenia. Now, you said this technique was not adapted. Would it not be possible to develop a special mindfulness-based program for schizophrenics? Guido? In England, there are some teams that try to develop projects for patients who had hallucinations, psychotic problems, delirium, for instance. But in fact, the programs as they are offered and developed, we talked about them, they tend to be more careful about these patients when they go through acute phases. Patients with traumatic backgrounds, with risks of reactivation of certain traumas during meditation. And then there's more recent data available, my colleagues probably know of that, that show that there are also secondary effects attached to this kind of practice. That's the bad news. So anxiety may increase, dissociation may occur, panic attacks too. But the good news is that these phenomena are usually transitional. A small minority of people who have such secondary effects call upon structured help. So by analogy, you may imagine that if you adjust this very well, if you calibrate this very well, very carefully, people with severe psychotic problems could benefit from such programs. In Oriental traditions, this precaution of ours is not so prevailing. But I would be rather careful about what you can offer to people who suffer from severe trauma of this kind. A question on this side of the room. Hello. Some years ago, I followed Jean-Gérard's course based on mindfulness and meditation. Well, some weeks ago, I heard that one of my daughters was suffering from a rare autoimmune disease, like an arthritis. So what would be the effect of meditation on children and autoimmune diseases? I think we have data available, but that data is not sufficient to claim that there are specific effects of meditation on either children or autoimmune diseases. However, the data available enables us to believe that these meditative approaches are interesting. You discover them, you experience them. It gives you a possibility to connect with what happens, and that is what makes the difference. That has an effect, an impact on your health. There are no studies evidencing this, but it's just common sense. Guillaume made very interesting experiences. He showed us that in extreme situations, does he have to fight against what happens, or can he just let go and accept what happens? He's able to open up to something he doesn't know. That's a good way of connecting to the environment. There are also more and more studies carried out on autoimmune diseases. Here in Strasbourg, we're going to develop some research in that area too. Irrespective of the disease, we're going to focus on the effect of meditation on children, because a lot is done in the educational area. Very early on, we can give children the possibility to open up to these dimensions and get trained, for instance, train their attention. Jean Sibilia, maybe a word on this point? Well, common sense is important. Medicine means you have to use common sense, particularly when you're faced with such diseases. There's a whole range of therapies available today that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. Traditional medicine can give you solutions we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago. So it's treatment, therapy, and meditation. It's one with the other. One does not exclude the other. It's not one or the other. Well, I tried to see what I could do as an addition. Acupuncture, for instance. The person I talked to seemed to say, well, you can always try, but what's the point? I think that we do not fully understand the legacy of implicit elements that are present in our culture. When you talk about separation of body and mind, that dates back a long time ago. Artificially, we sometimes separate things one from the other. They seem obvious. When you're not feeling well, You know that if your head is not well, your body isn't well. And then all of a sudden, if you want to connect all these elements, you need scientific evidence to do so, but you can also rely on your own intuition, your own experience. I would like to add something to the question that was raised by that lady about autoimmune diseases. Some studies show the effect of stress on certain markers. For instance, Melissa Rosenkranz and David Richardson's studies have shown that people who suffer from asthma, for instance, when they have acute crises, when they're under stress, there are more inflammatory markers. So you have to give people more tools to better manage their stress, to decrease these markers, and that could help them to fight against these autoimmune diseases. Furthermore, at molecular level, one of the strongest effects one can observe when it comes to meditation is that the infection, the expression of the infectious gene decreases. That is quite encouraging. It cannot harm to add meditation to that, to integrate meditation in the way in which you deal with such a chronic disease or an autoimmune disease. Thank you, Perla, for this addition. Maybe another question on this side of the room? Hello, thank you to all of you for your presentations and for sharing these ideas. It's quite impressive. I'm sorry, I will exclude all those of you who are not French. It's a question I would like to put to Professor Sibilia and Professor Bloch. I would like to know how you integrated meditation practice in your daily life and practice. Social Security and the different medical associations put a lot of pressure on us on a daily basis. They tell us this is not a good idea, etc. I'm not entirely sure I fully grasp your question. Do you mean why are meditation courses not reimbursed by Social Security, by the National Health Service? Well, it's more or less that. I think we are moving towards that. There are also some good indicators there. There's a health plan that has been developed and that will be implemented soon at governmental level. There are also reports that were drawn up showing that mindfulness can be one of the elements to be included in the new health plan or health roadmap. So anything that contributes to that is a good idea. Of course, there are no certainties attached to that, but I'm sure, I think it is likely that we are moving that way. But it is not reimbursed by our Social Security or by other insurance schemes. Now we have preventive medicine, we have public health medicine. Here too, we hope that we will soon give more importance to prevention-based medicine. And what about different medical associations? Well, I can't give you an answer to that question. I can't speak on behalf of these associations. Now, there is no professional expression of that. There is no medicine through meditation, so the association is just a clearinghouse in a way. Now, the problem couldn't be looked at it from that point of view today, but if things are to change in this area, the medical associations look at what happens. I'm sure you're thinking about homeopathy or integrative medicine. Now, the association representing doctors is more of a guarantor of good practice. I'm not sure John will understand this. This is a very Franco-French system, Franco-French surrealism, I would call it. So one has to look at this with a pinch of salt. Now, we do have an organization, an Ordre des Médecins. It is legitimate. We'll have to see if it is going to look into the matter or not, but for the time being, it doesn't. Now, time flies. Two questions here, one there. We'll take them en bloc and then we'll reply to all of them.
Thank you so much for this fascinating moment, sharing your thoughts with us. Some time ago, I came across neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis, and when the first time I experienced guided meditation, I was wondering to what extent they overlap or they relate. Could you please clarify a little bit about that? And also, if there is a relationship, how do you decide how to deal with patients, which approach to apply in what cases? Thank you.
Jean-Gérard,
Jean-Gérard, would you like to answer this? I'll answer in French because there are interpreters to do it into English. You are asking the question about neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis. Is it the same thing? Is not the same thing as meditation? My answer would need many angles to look at it. Are there studies set up to see how the brain functions, the body, the neurosciences, the imaging functions? There are more and more studies doing that. But from the point of view of the experience, what we're trying to do with meditation is we develop a conscious presence, voluntary presence of what we live through at this time now, at this moment, whether you're going into free diving or in your daily life, you're having to cope with an illness, whatever it is. Hypnosis suggests to lose this voluntary conscious linking up with the mental activity of attention. So straight away, there's a major difference between the two. Then, as an element of therapies, you're asking, should I choose this rather than that? Well, I don't think that we have any final answer to give you on that. What we can say that for meditation, the use of therapies that is immensely beneficial in some diseases, and it is demonstrated more and more, is very much reducing the full approach of meditation. For example, the MBSR program, which is much more wide-ranging than just looking at therapies. It's looking at the way of being in your life. And maybe you could have said it yourself, Beatrice. This is what patients are getting to finally after a simple 8-week-long program to which they came because they had a health problem. Very quickly, it goes into issues to do with all of their life and the way that they deal with their life. And it's magnificent to finally go back to Guillaume to say how he expressed what he experienced in his extreme deep diving was linking up to his daily life, and how sometimes he wanted to fight against situations that you can't do anything about. The best thing is to accept and adapt. And this is not exclusive to meditation. There are philosophers who said that in ancient time before us. So this is how we can look at things, I have a feeling. Just one little example of connectivity. In Paris, in Saint-Joseph Hospital, there is an anesthetist who practices mindfulness meditation and accompanies in cardiovascular surgery. He works with a surgeon, and both of them are working with hypnosis, which enables them to have a very precious tool in some pathologies not to put the patient down for too long. People who can't take the hypnosis, they can't take the anesthesia for too long, and you really have in the operating theater, you have a whole staff around who are practicing this work in meditation beforehand, and then they propose hypnosis because that is the best tool appropriately to help the patient to live through the operation the best way possible while still being totally there but not completely there. And there's a presence still, and the operation is still possible without any pain. So there are some meetings now, and we're at the very beginning of those discoveries right now. Two last questions now. On the left, first of all, one on either side. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for all these elements. I was here the whole weekend, and I shall go back really very moved and very happy with everything I've heard. And I'd like to share a life experience with you in link with what we've heard, my best experience of becoming a mother. It is an example. I had a child that was a breech, and the head and the chin was high up. My midwife said it won't happen, it'll never happen. And profoundly, I'm a sports person, and I was sure that I could go via the natural way, even in a breech. This is what I heard the message deep down from my body. The first X-ray told me it's too bad, you can't do it with your pelvis dimension, but I knew I could do it. Why? Because I really was concentrating on meditating on my body. I did another X-ray in another hospital, it would be okay, it'll go through. And I was very happy to say that because I was deeply convinced of it. I knew it would work. I knew it would be all right. In the day I gave birth, just before, my doctor told me, no, it won't happen. You're going to have a cesarean planned. And I wanted to have a natural way to give birth to my child. And I thought, I'll wait until I lose my waters. And then I lost the waters. The head came back down, and it was still a breech, but it was the best way to give him birth naturally. The last week, not very easy in the pregnancy. I had to fight against the medicines, against the doctors. I just wanted to be more in connection with my own baby, and it was very difficult to fight against the doctors. And as you said just now, we have to bring back meditation nowadays into the doctor's surgeries, whatever their specialities. I think it would help enormously a lot of people to be more listening to their patients and help them to make the good choices. And I do hope it's going to work better in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you for this wonderful experience.
Alors, c'est Xavier? Oui.
Xavier? Yes, I am Xavier. I didn't see you, but I think it is you. Go on. Thank you. I just simply wanted to say that I came to share something that I really feel now very deeply. I was part and parcel, as many people, of the people who enabled this moment to happen, and I feel very alive right now, enriched, immensely enriched by everything we've shared. Beatrice, Elisabeth, Guido, Jean-Gérard, John, Geneviève, Jean, and you, Guillaume. And all of us, as we are all co-creators of this moment in time. And I'd like to thank you all. Thank you for all that. Thank us all. Thank you. And maybe suggest a very simple way to integrate everything we've experienced, particularly thanks to you who are in the panel, just to share it by connecting to our own ways, by a short inner silence time, so that we can acknowledge, that we say, thank you to you, little baby, to acknowledge this moment.
Position.
Thank you for this beautiful proposal. We accept it.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. I believe that everybody felt it here. There's a quality of what came from the panel and the quality of reception and listening, and it works both ways. And I can assure you that throughout those 3 days we had a real feeling of this very strong receptive quality. It's very important. It builds us up and carries us along. We realize that we want to give to you is really received and is very important. As you're still there, I'm sure that there's still quite a lot of important things, and it would be a pity not to say it. I'm going to be very brief. Just one question. What is your opinion on this theme of body and mind, the manual therapies such as osteopathy, chiropractic, physiotherapy? What is their place in the future medicine? Briefly. It's brief, but it's a major question. Are you talking as a practitioner? I'm an osteopath myself. I thought so. So it's a whole area, of course. I think there are 2 French people out of 3 who go to see a osteopath. So that means that there's a lot of people interested. I think we're going back to another issue. It's the medicine on body and mind. The touch, therapies taking care of people through this whole immense world of everything that is embedded within our bodies, whether it is physical or psychological. The body inscription of mind, anybody who does manual manipulation as a rheumatologist, I do them a lot. It's our entry port into the fact that obviously body and mind are not totally separate. They're not just simply communicating by either way. We're beginning to have scientific proof of that, but it's really 2 integrated systems that are embedded together of the expression of what living beings we are. Totally unified, not at all separate. And this idea to want to separate this approach from medicine or this care, body care, from another one, are the end result of all education that wants permanently to separate things, to make them dual, whereas they are absolutely profoundly non-dual. So the praise of this approach compared to others, well, is this whole approach is there. Instead of talking about integrative medicine, maybe we should talk about convergence of the different care, of a real medicines of the being that integrates all of the potential domains of the human being, so that we can see that we consider things and separating things as we've done it. Thank you very much. Yes, I want you to really reassemble, converge things and not separate them. Thank you very much for this question. It is a comment, and it's very important to me. Sense and sensoriality and sensations have the same origin. One problem in our modern society is not new, but we lose sense and link to reality. If nature has given us some ears, some eyes, and our nose and our hands to touch, is to use them. Why don't people look at each other anymore? They don't touch anymore. They don't smell each other. If you're touching people, it's absolutely serious. It's part of communication, not just the word, the spoken word. Animals do it. They communicate in such a way. Mammals communicate in such a way. And we've forgotten that now. And they are founding pillars of what we are. If we cut ourselves from all that, our society is dead. And this is why Guillaume's experience, and here at 1000% I say the same thing, if we don't go back to the the time of the century-old grotto man, we have to go back to the way we were. Communication is just that, and medicine must take that into account. It's very complicated when we talk about biomolecular medicine, and it doesn't give a lot of space to those senses, and your so-called manual medicines do integrate that much better. So we shouldn't see them as just therapies, but some things which is a lot of common sense. Now, Guillaume, would you like to give... is it for me to conclude a horrible task, or do you want to react a little bit?
Peut-être dans ce qui a été dit.
Maybe you were touched by something that you heard. Well, of course, I was touched by many of the statements that have been made. And I wanted to take the floor several times, but I saw the tempus fugit. And if I can react to something that really affected me, is when you talked about cooperating with nature. You must have read all the books by Jean-Marie Pelt about the fact that it is absolutely necessary to be in symbiosis with nature instead of competing with nature. The problem is that we have based everything on competition in our modern society, including in sports. You talk about a champion of deep diving, of records that are held. But in our sport, we have established a new model, because the competitions to which we participate were 3 world championships where we give 3 medals. But actually, when we have a deep diving event, people come together simply to support one another in doing something where we will give our best. And in fact, the medicine of tomorrow, we should go beyond the idea of competition and determine who is going to receive the award of the sacred medicine. Take everything that exists and how we can all together provide our little contribution so that we come to good medicine. That's what you said a little while ago. We need good medicine. And maybe it's a bit utopian to speak about that, but we have to rethink the whole model. And the idea of cooperation should be put at the very center of what we are reflecting upon. I think competition is dépassé. Cooperation should be at the very center of a greater humanity, and meetings as these testify to this. And I do hope we're going to embark on that path. Thank you.
Voilà, alors la journée...
Right, we're slowly coming to the end of this day. John is going to make a synthesis, a final synthesis of these last 2 days. Maybe there's a fundamental things that he would like to emphasize. But I will simply take up these last words, that is to say, cooperation and integrative medicine, health, integrative health, integrative medicine. Everything has its place there, and each one should push back the limits and integrate. What I found interesting, that nobody said, this is how we should do things, this is the direction, and it's up to everyone to cooperate and work together and broaden their areas of intervention. I think patients can really, do something, shake things up, and say what can do. I mean, patients can induce their doctors to work in a certain way. And everything that we heard this morning gives us hope for the future. So at each and everyone to work together in cooperation, not in opposition, but all together. John? We'll leave John on the stage. We thank you for your attention, all the others.
Voilà.